Hi everyone, this is Tanya with Flying Dog Studio. Thank you for joining me. In this video, we're going to take a look at how to layer watercolor in order to create not only depth in a piece, but visual interest with the color. So if that sounds like something interesting to you and you would like to learn, then hang in there. We're going to finish drawing this piece out and lining it, and then we're going to get started. Alright, now that we have everything lined, it's time to start mixing our colors. For this piece, I'm going to be using a size 8 round with a pointed tip from Royal and Langnickel on that brush. And you can see my size 2 over to the left hand side, and I will also be using a scrubber brush, but those come a little bit later on in the piece. So the first thing I'm going to do is mix the color for the sky and really the background, because the background consists not only of the sky, but part of that hill and those bushes in the back. And the first thing I'm going to do for the whole piece is just get a very good layer of color down, kind of a wash down on everything. And as those layers dry, then I can come back and put more layers up on top. So that's why I have a couple of colors going here. Now you will see me reach over to the right hand side. That's where I have my 2 cups of water, one for rinsing my dirty brush and one for getting some clear water to come back and mix in the paints. And I like to get a lot of colors mixed up, and I will have those colors listed for you on the screen as I'm putting them down there, because we are going to be covering kind of a large area, and I'm going to save some of these colors for coming back over the piece in just a few minutes. So now I'm using a wash brush, and I'm going all the way around, and I believe that's a Winsor & Newton brush, and I'm going all the way around that background and just getting a good wash of water on everything, just clear water, and then coming back with my premix color and laying it down and just letting it blend together. Now I'm not being too careful about and too concerned about if it gets inside this line or that line or how even it looks, because we're coming back and putting colors on top of this, especially in the background. I'm really not concerned because the reference piece I found had quite a bit of clouds and it was like a hazy day, so I want to portray all of that in the background. So I'm allowing there to be some dark areas and some light areas. Now the paper I am using is 100% cotton. The paper that you've seen me use in previous videos, if you watched those, is not 100% cotton. So this absorbs water just a little bit differently. So I'm going to go ahead and do some of the foreground, and I guess you would kind of call it the middle ground, the grass, and I guess that's a castle in the background, and the trees that you see there in front of it, those are kind of the middle ground. We kind of have 2 middle grounds here, I guess. So I'm working on the grass, that hill coming down to all of this rock fence that is in the front. And again, I'm just getting a wash on that. I did wet on wet. That's what we call that when we put water down first, a little wet on wet. Now I'm coming back and mixing a wash for those rocks, and I'm going to put one wash for the rocks, even though, as you're going to see in a few minutes, those rocks are actually multicolored. So, and that's where we are really going to see the layering take effect on things. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to mix some color for the castle and for those trees that are in front of it. And then we're going to come back once things dry, and we're going to put a second coat of paint. All right, now that we have a first coat down on everything, I'm going to kind of take advantage of the fact that those bushes are still a little bit wet, and I'm going to come back with the same color over the top of them right in there and add a little bit darker area because we do have some shadows that are hitting it. And I want to put some green down first because we know in our minds these are green, and I can tell from my reference photo that these have green in them, and so I'm going to use that as my base color. And usually with watercolor you want to put down your light colors and then come back with your dark colors, but sometimes when you're layering you come back with some light colors on top, and you're going to see that with these trees later on, and also with the rocks down the front. So you can see that made a difference. Coming back, I had the light on there, it dried just slightly because this is cold press paper, and watercolor will dry a little more quickly on cold press than it will warm press paper. Or I should say hot press. I don't know if they make warm press, but hot press paper. And so because it dried quickly, it was still slightly damp, but it dried quickly, I got good movement on those trees, and I was able to layer that same shade of green right on top of those trees in the background. Now I'm making some darker shade of brown, and I always take my browns and I mix them with blue, and that gives me almost a black color, especially if you add a little red in. And depending on if you're using ultramarine, if you want to get kind of a gray, you're going to use ultramarine, and if you want to go a little bit darker, you can use that phthalo blue, and you can really get some good dark colors. And you'll see on these rocks I'm going to go back and forth with colors and add to this mix so that I can get some darker and lighter colors. Some will be more blue, some will be more green, and I kind of have to go back and forth on that as I'm mixing and laying it down. But I'll try to get one color and then go over the whole piece where I see that color right on top of this layer that we've put on, and then I will come back and make another color and lay that color right on top as well. So right now, and this is what I was saying earlier, you're going to see it on the trees, you're going to see it on the rocks. We usually like to put down our lighter colors and then add our darker colors on top with watercolor. But in this particular instance, I have done my light color. Now I'm putting in all of my shadows, and that kind of helps me to know where the rocks are, because honestly this is like a big puzzle with all of these rocks on top of one another. So I'm putting those shadows in, and then I'm going to come back and add some colors on top. All right, now this is almost the same shade that we used to get that wash on the rocks to begin with, except I've added a little more red to it. So this allows us to have a deeper color. And a lot of these rocks did have, I would call it kind of a sand color on them, but some of them did have some really deeper red, as you can see that I'm adding on here. So this is what I'm going to be doing, is coming back, as you can see, you wait for each layer to dry, and then you can come back on top. Even though I had those shadows on there, I can paint right on top of the shadows with that lighter color, and it's going to give me some good texture and some good color movement in those rocks. Something that I want you to notice with the color that I just created, this green, because I think it demonstrates it well, is that when I put it on the different rocks, depending on the colors that are underneath, I'm getting an entirely different shade of green. And that is because watercolors are much like colored pencils in that they are a transparent medium. You can put one down on top of the other and you don't lose the color underneath, but the color on top sort of enhances it and it creates an entirely new shade. So that is one thing I love about watercolors, is that you can layer them like this. And this is the same color. If you'll notice, I'm using the same color. Now I'm coming back with a little bit different shade, but it's one we've used before, a little more red. But all of these colors I will put on rocks that are already there, that will already have a different color down to begin with, and you're going to see a difference in the colors, and that's because of the transparent quality of watercolor. Watercolor is sort of a dance. So I put the shadows down first, as you saw earlier on these rocks. But now that everything is dried and we have all of the other colors down, it's just time to go back and sort of redarken all of those areas again. So I've created another dark shading color to come back in on top. And again, this is the thing with watercolor. The more layers you put down, it can be the same color you're putting on top. Once you let a layer dry and put that color on top again, it automatically makes it darker. So I'm coming back and getting the little details and all the little cracks. And if there are any that I missed originally, I'm coming back and going over those and really trying to make these rocks set on top of one another and not be flat. So now we've made it to that front middle ground, I think is what we're going to call it. And I already had the good light green wash on there, but this ground, it doesn't have distinct blades of grass in it, but it does have, it was like a very mowed, or perhaps there had been animals grazing, so it was very close to the ground, and we're seeing it from a distance, so I don't need to make individual blades of grass, but I do need to indicate the different shades of green, the different patches of green that we see on the hill. So I have my original light down, and I'm putting the darker greens on top, and here comes another dark green, but you're going to see that I finished this off with a little bit of yellow green to kind of tie it all together. All right, before we head toward the back, the rest of that middle ground, I realized that I forgot to do these little posts that are sticking out there. I was really into the rocks and then went straight to the grass and forgot about the little posts. So now that the grass is dry, I can come back and I can paint right on top of these. And in case I didn't say it earlier, we did start with wet on with everything, but now we are doing wet on dry. And again, I told you I was going to be using this size 8 for primarily the entire piece. It's not until the very end that we get to that smaller brush. But as you can see, in order to get these finer lines, all I have to do is take the tip of that round brush and hold it perpendicular to the paper, and we can get those nice fine lines that we need. All right, now we are ready to move to the rest of that middle ground. So as you can see, I have created a very dark green, and this is going to come back into some of these super dark areas, and we got a good feel for that when I came back the first time with that wash, and then I went back over it before it completely dried with the same green to kind of outline those areas that we're going to have all of this nice dark. So I'm going to carry that all the way across, and we're going to fill in different areas with different shades of green. And again, I let this dry. If I'm going to come back and paint on top of it, I'm going to let it dry first, and then I'm going to come back and paint on top. And the last greens that you will see me put on these trees, or these bushes, I think they're probably trees, is going to be more of a yellow green. So I've broken the rule. If there are definite rules in watercolor, I have broken it by putting the light color on last instead of first. And when you're thinking about watercolor, I say this with my digital art. If you've seen any of my digital art on here, there are a million ways to do one thing. So whatever works for you, that is the best way to do it. So this is what I found that works for me, is layering colors and kind of breaking the rules and doing it my own way. So this little guy over here was really catching the shadow, and we had to come back and put a great deal of dark on him. Almost the whole tree is getting the dark. So this is where I told you I'm coming back and breaking the rules. This is more of a yellow-green, but I wanted to catch the light on this tree and give it, I felt like it's a little too washed out in some of the light areas, and it needed a little bit more of that yellow-green. Now that we are getting to the building in the background, I am actually creating the same shade that we used to put that wash on there at the very beginning. However, if you remember, as I said, you can use the same shade and come back once you have painted a layer, paint that same shade on top, and it's going to be darker. I'm going to take advantage on here of the fact that we do have that wash down, and I'm going to use that for the highlighted areas on the building, because this is not perfectly flat where I'm painting right now. It's kind of rounded, and I want to use that background. It needs some color, the wash that we gave it, but you'll see that I will leave some areas that are going to be unpainted on there, and that gives us our highlight where those little edges are coming out toward us. So we're going to go over the whole castle with this, and then the top here had a little bit of green in it, so I've added a little bit of green to that, and it was a little bit darker, and it's basically going back and forth with different shades to make it darker in some areas and lighter in others. And then we get toward the end, I'm going to tell you what I'm doing to pull some highlights out of that castle. So as we've done in the rocks and the trees and the ground, on the castle, we are layering the color. We have so many layers on here already, but we need all of those to give it texture and to give it depth. So now I'm coming back, and because it's in the distance, I want to layer some shapes that indicate brick or rock. Now, when we are doing an art piece, unless it is something close to you, you're not going to put very distinct detail in it. You only want an indication of color and shape and form. That's all you want in your piece. And our mind just pulls all of those things together because we know that it's made of bricks or it's made of rocks, but we don't have to see the individual bricks and rocks. And we know that those trees have individual leaves on them, but we don't need to see the individual leaves in order to know that it's a tree. For watercolor, it's a wonderful medium to create those things. We simply put the water down and those things just flow. We just have the shapes on there. So that's what I'm doing now, is just creating the shapes I need to make the building believable. And we are finally headed to the background once more. We can't leave it like that. That was just our beginning colors that we put down. So I know it's a large area, but I'm not re-wetting the whole thing just yet. I will do that in a few minutes, but right now I am simply putting those colors back down. And again, same colors I used before, but we're putting on top of something we already have down, so it's making it a little bit darker. And I'm not going to let this get completely dry. It's going to be a little bit damp, and I'm going to come back and put those bushes in as well. So I did this all in one setting. I did not get my hair dryer out and dry this or let it air dry. I mixed my colors up while it was still wet, and I just kept those colors moving because the background is a little bit tricky in that it's not distinct. It has clouds, as I said earlier, it's kind of hazy, everything's really out of focus, and that is what we want to create. So I'm putting all of these down while it's wet. Now I'm wetting this area with some color and creating some darker areas, and then you're going to see me come to the sky and turn this whole piece upside down and work from the top downward. So everything is turned upside down, just as I said, and I'm starting right on what we would call the horizon line, except in this reference, it's hard to distinguish where that horizon line would be because basically it all looks like sky. And we want it to look really dark and gray in some areas, and then in other areas, we want it to look a little bit light. So we're going to keep moving it back and forth. And like I said, that paper is wet and it's starting to warp on me a little bit. I'm not a person that enjoys taping my paper down. Some people do that. I'm not a person that enjoys that. So I'm just going to keep going back and forth over this and moving those colors around. And now I have a brush that holds a lot of water, and this is straight water that I'm coming back over and blending that whole area together. I have those colors and I want to move them around to make it more flowing and look like that mist or clouds or haze that was in the background. Now that the back is completely filled in and it's only slightly damp, it's not completely dry yet, I'm coming back with my wonderful little scrubber brush. And I love this little guy. He can erase mistakes, he can pull up color, and what he's doing for me here is he's taking those short synthetic bristles with a little bit of water. It's not completely wet, not like we're painting something. We want it to be damp, but we don't want it to be a soaking brush, so you'll see me tap it on that towel. This is allowing me to pick up and to move around some of that color to create some of those clouds that were moving in the background, or mist. Like I said, I don't even know what to call it. But that's what I'm doing with this little brush, and it's hard to tell in the light. The time of day I was working, is kind of hard to tell what it's doing there, but it is picking some of those up and it's creating that in the background. So I really love this scrubber brush. The scrubber, as I said, it is also a Royal and Langnickel. All of these brushes I'm using today, except for the one by Winsor Newton, that mop brush. All of these are Royal and Langnickel, and this is part of their Zen series. So now I'm taking that tiny brush and I'm lifting color, because there were some areas on top of this part that's going forward, this part of the roof, that had some light areas. And sometimes it's hard when you're working with a big brush. You might accidentally cover up some areas, and that's what I did. So I am pulling out those colors along the roof. And that is some of our last touch-up that we are doing. Now, if you have any questions about this, please leave those below and I will get back with you on any questions you have. I appreciate you watching. I will have my supply list and all of the colors listed on the video and at the end. Thanks so much for watching.